So, hello, and welcome back to Conversations in New York City. Today, we have Eric from our team joining us. You might have seen him in some of our previous videos, but if not, Eric, could you please introduce yourself, your role at Magic, maybe a fun fact, you know?
Certainly, no. So fun fact, we're here in New York City dealing with all people who don't care that we're filming. I am the Vice President for Consulting and Curriculum Development and Product Strategy at Magic. I've been here for about 5 years, and long story short, my career has always been focused on acquiring, developing, curating, and publishing content that could be consumed by all students to the greatest possible effect. So, really what I focus on is ensuring that every student has an equal opportunity to succeed by virtue of the content that I'm helping create.
Which is so critical to even just our mantra at Magic, digital learning for everyone.
Everyone, absolutely. No, it's one of the things that actually animated me to join Magic in the first place.
I love it. Well, we're gonna jump in. The first question we have is, how should curriculum developers balance foundational skills with emerging competencies like AI literacy, computational thinking, and digital citizenship in K-12 education?
Yeah, so I think with any new competency like AI literacy, while you're trying to balance that as well as developing the core skills that have always been important, reading, writing, speaking, listening, math, what have you, what I think a good strategy has always been is to embed those new competencies within the context of the core competencies, those foundational skills that you're trying to learn. So for instance, if it is something on computational skills or data analysis, you can begin working that into the math curriculum. So students are grappling with math problems that begin to familiarize themselves or familiarize them almost by osmosis by the virtue of it being there. AI literacy could be worked into an ELA curriculum, reading things that are generated by AI and applying critical thinking skills to that. So students are, becoming aware that AI isn't always trustworthy, and they're using the skills they're learning in that context on this new area. I think it's also important to do this progressively. So to begin in the early grades in the right way, beginning to prime the students for their familiarity with these new areas. So by the time they're actually grappling with them directly or applying them, they've been seeing it their whole lives. So it's not an alien competency that they're dealing with.
Sure. Now, but as a follow-up to that, because this question focused on K through 12, but there's people out there, obviously, with AI developing who are already in higher education, workforce. What are ways that they can develop this competency in AI literacy today?
I think that is, since the students in higher ed are going to have a lot of the competencies already, hopefully by the time they're in college, one of the things they are developing is themselves as good critical thinkers, good citizens of the world. So that, I think, is, again, you can maybe not immerse it or blend it into another curriculum, but you can append it to that. So you can, create new modules within particular class settings, just new environments. I think if you're grappling with a new skill and you're a higher ed student, it's more of an applied seat anyway. So I think that's how one might introduce in higher ed.
I really like this concept that you're emphasizing in your responses about digital citizenship, because at the end of the day, we all are still human at it, and I feel like we do have that responsibility that comes with any engagement with new AI software, new technology every day. So,
and I think the presence of AI increasingly, yes. So I often think about developing students' core skills in many ways, but that's all in service of eventually developing good citizens of the world. And I think that the presence of AI really augments or exacerbates something that's been an issue for us for many years, which is just being good critical consumers of information and then being able to act in the world based on better information. So AI just really sort of lights a fire under that notion of you have to be a good critical consumer of the information that's in front of you. That was true prior to AI. Even more true now.
Love that. All right, moving on to our next one, continuing about this good citizens and being a good digital citizen right now. What are the ethical considerations of incorporating generative AI tools, or I'll even add agentic AI at this point because we're starting to see that more, into content creation for education materials, particularly regarding bias and accuracy?
Yeah, so if I understand the question, really the ethical considerations, what are they, or how do you grapple with them? I think certainly anything relative to AI, based on what we've just talked about, you want to be a good critical consumer of it. If you are developing content using AI, particularly if it's going to end up in the hands of students who are reliant on it to be academically successful, be successful in the world, you don't want to just unleash AI and have no stewardship of what you're putting out into the world. You need a human in the loop at every step of the way. I personally, and Magic as an entity, has never developed content on behalf of a partner that hasn't had a human really all in the DNA of that content.
Okay.
So a human is what's going to be able to ensure that ethical considerations are in play, that there are no biases. We don't know what biases are implicit in AI to begin with.
Yeah.
We don't know the people who developed the code, and humans were somewhere in the loop of creating AI.
Yeah.
Which means it would likely reflect their biases. So we need people who are cognizant of what it is we're trying to do, what we're trying to evade, and they can ensure that it's accurate information, that it is unbiased information. Humans are flawed. That's still a flawed process. But that's going to be a much more effective way of attending to those ethical considerations than absent a human in the loop.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so then following up to this, because I've attended a few conferences recently and had conversations in terms of what is this overall balance? Like, what percentage are we looking at now for any content being developed maybe in AI workflows, and that how much is going to be human verified, human usage within this production process, and then how much of it's going to fall into AI? Like, in your opinion, what is the perfect quote-unquote balance to
asking the completely unanswerable question.
Yeah, not to put you on the spot, but to also put you on the spot.
Yeah, I don't think that there is a precise percentage that I could confidently suggest is the right percentage, and I'm not sure that one actually exists, but what I would say is that the human contribution to any AI content that is generated should be on the significant side. The plurality, if not the majority of the content, should really be handled, managed, edited, rewritten, attended to by the human. Ultimately, AI, in my view, for content generation, is not really meant to generate content and enable you to just put it out into the world. It's an accelerator.
Okay.
It's enabling those subject matter experts and writers to take a step forward, not necessarily have to grapple with the tyranny of the blank page, get themselves at least a foundation for the corpus of material they want to put out into the world, and then manage it from there. So I see it less as a partner to a subject matter expert, and certainly not a replacement for a subject matter expert, but more as an accelerator to the efforts they're undertaking.
I love that it's not a replacement, because I feel that many people are still afraid, and their first initial gut response is saying like AI is replacing people. And there's this whole fear then with the adoption into just, I don't want to say in education, but really overall in what we're doing. And I love this whole emphasis that it is not replacing. It's just, as we're hearing more frequently, it's becoming the co-pilot that you need.
I think co-pilot is even, to my view, is lifting it even further than it should be. Again, it's really just a starting place, and if you look at, and I'm a purist, I'm a lifelong editor, looking at content that is purely AI generated with a very light or no human touch, it tends to read as pretty soulless. So I think that, again, what I've been saying for the last 3 years is that AI cannot replace a human, in that it lacks judgment. It lacks the ability to trigger empathy. And it lacks that sort of ephemeral quality that moves you when you're reading a good work of art, or anything that is again really just creative and human born.
Yeah, that's exactly. You're in agreement with Ron Howard then, because in his talk he was saying it just doesn't have the creativity that we have at this point. Now, who's to know what happens in the future with that? Maybe we can reach at least some close approximity to that level of creativity of humans, but I suppose
it's very good at rote behaviors and very complex but rote behaviors. But it thus far it is not approximating a human with their own characteristics, their own personality, their own soul.
Sure. Alrighty, on to our next discussion point is how can EdTech solutions bridge the digital divide to ensure equitable access to high quality educational content for underserved communities? And I would love to also, if you can elaborate in terms of maybe this global reach that we're starting to see with the emerging markets in like Africa and Southeast Asia as well.
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of things. Certainly relative to product design, one needs to keep some basic principles in mind. The availability of offline access, for instance, to your product, acknowledging that broadband, even in the US, but certainly globally, is not available to everyone. Most of the globe seems to, I don't know the statistics on this, they seem to have a phone. So making sure that your digital products are available offline, can be consumed through the phone, and being cognizant of the devices that people actually do have access to. And outside of the product design itself, being, again, aware that you have an incredibly varied audience potentially consuming and purchasing your goods. Relative to the content, it has to be cognizant of the geography, the culture, and the people who are consuming it. Again, I'm speaking from an educational perspective, but I think it is true for any content.
What strategies can curriculum developers employ to create culturally responsive content that reflects diverse perspectives while meeting standardized learning objectives? We just kind of touched on this, but maybe you have some other points to add.
Yeah, I could say a little bit more about that, because there's a lot that goes into this. I think one of the things that's most important, we have a sort of a trope, or at least a habit in publishing and product development, educationally speaking, of having bias checks done at the tail end of content development or product development, what have you. I think it is more important to take a more holistic and inclusive approach by upstream assembling a team of people who have differing perspectives to actually engage in that content development from the beginning. I think it is great to have milestones and check-ins and oversight and redundancies in the process to ensure that you're navigating those waters in the correct way, but I think it actually begins with people who do represent different perspectives being part of the process from its start. And I think it's also not just about the inclusion of different peoples, although that is important too, but it has to be, the content needs to be developed in such a way that it is inclusive, that it makes people feel welcome. Might be an overly precious term in this, but they shouldn't feel alienated from the content. They should feel like they are immersed in an experience, a learning experience, a reading experience that is familiar to them. So one needs to not just simply drop in examples of different peoples or different regions of the world, but one needs to actually include those and then be really cognizant of strategies that are going to make them feel like this is a place for them to succeed and thrive and flourish and learn.
Moving on to our next question. How can universal design for learning principles be embedded in digital content to support students with varying abilities and learning needs? So starting to move into the conversation of accessibility, which is very timely globally. We have a lot of deadlines coming up for reaching European compliance, American, etc.
Right. So I think my posture relative to universal design for learning is that ultimately, while it serves different populations, sort of very purposefully, sort of a neurodiverse population or populations with different learning challenges for whatever reason. I had this conversation in a podcast I was doing yesterday on neurodiversity, and the person to whom I was speaking was talking about the strategies that she used in the workplace as a neurodiverse person, and somebody who was putting out a platform meant to serve those. And it brought to mind many years ago when I published for ESL students, English as Second Language learners, and the interventions and supports that I integrated into my products at the time. What we found was they helped everybody. They didn't just simply help the students for whom English was a second language. I see universal design for learning as doing precisely the same thing. It's very analogous in that if you're trying to address an auditory learner or a kinesthetic learner, whatever type of learners, I think that building products that address those various ways of consuming knowledge and developing skills is ultimately good for all students. So I'm a big proponent of working that kind of experience in wherever possible. Again, I'm animated by the notion of putting achievement within reach of all students, regardless of their preparedness, their skill set, their geography, their background. So that just is, it's part of my toolkit.
Of course. Now, more specifically, when you're building this content, like any content, is it being built to be ready for any type of learner? So if someone is coming across it and they do have auditory, like hard hearing, or they are hard at reading, they have dyslexia, is this already built into the existing content to be flexible and adaptable for that learner? Or is it more that you're building the content and then you're building it because this was already previously known that the content would be digested by a learner with that?
I think it's probably a little bit of a mix of both. Certainly the magic, anything we develop is meant to be born accessible. So for somebody who has visual impairments or challenges, the content, the products that we develop can be screen read. So facilitating somebody who has challenges with their sight, or similar with other competencies and ways of consuming. By and large, one has to plan for that. So if you have somebody who is very specifically a kinesthetic learner, they might learn better by some sort of constructivist principle in play, actually building something or engaging in a simulation, something more applied in its nature. That you can't simply turn on a dime and turn content that was meant to be more static into that. But increasingly what I'm finding is that our partners are planning for that. And certainly when it comes to just baseline accessibility, we try and do that reflexively, regardless of whatever the requirements in front of us might be. We at least want to attend to ADA and WCAG principles and really make sure that students who have those particular challenges have an equal opportunity to learn.
That's great. All right, we have 2 more questions left, and they're both kind of looking towards the future now. So the first one's talking more about misinformation and digital literacy, which we talked about AI literacy, but going back to media literacy, which I think has been a little bit out of the spotlight with the whole AI boom right now. But how can EdTech tools and curricula empower students to critically evaluate this online content and develop media literacy skills? But I would say maybe not at the level that we've previously focused on what it means to be media literate, maybe looking more towards what it means to be media literate.
I think now versus what we talked about earlier and what it has always been, I think the skills don't change necessarily. I think the stakes have changed.
Interesting.
And I think that the venues through which one gets their information has changed. But I think this has always been true relative to media literacy and being a critical thinker of what content is put in front of you. there's a Reagan-esque phrase, not Reagan-esque, it actually was Reagan, of trust but verify.
Sure.
One needs to understand where the material they're consuming has come from, who the parties who assembled it are, what their own objectives might be. We are just buried beneath information from every venue, from every device, in every context, in every setting. So again, that goes to my point about the stakes have just grown, and with AI, it is just a much more fluid exchange. It is not like many years ago where one might get some information by picking up a newspaper at the beginning of your day, or turning on the nightly news at night, where you're given sort of discrete buckets of content. Of course, you'd have your life going on around you, and there's information being presented there, but now it is so ubiquitous that the skills, I think, need to be, we need to start training students on those skills very early on, so that as they go, they're cutting their teeth on just being good critical consumers, so they can. And I think we need to always make it clear what the stakes are, even if it doesn't seem like a particularly...
Well, we're getting on to our last one. I promise. We've been out here so long. We've had so many people walk in front of the camera. The sun has now shifted, actually, and the sound from the construction's low now.
I think the construction workers are off duty now. So
we'll just jump into the last one then. Again, looking ahead, what emerging technologies or developments in education will have the most significant impacts? And you can speak towards just education in general, society. I had specifically gone into curriculum and content development here, but you can say to the next decade, but I think that's even far out. I would say the next year or two, because we're developing so fast. I feel like a decade's not fair.
Yeah, because these things, the innovation and the revolutions are sort of just, they aggregate on themselves, and it's just exponential development on these fronts. I think you're right. 10 years, who knows? 3 months, who knows? I think currently, I will suggest that AI, just given the latent potential that it holds, is likely to have the most profound impacts just on the availability of information, the skills we will need to develop to not fall prey to that information, and to the skills that are going to, in some respects, go extinct or atrophy to some degree, and the skills that will rise to take the helm. I think a lot about the English composition paper. I was an English major in college, so I majored in my mother's tongue. The English composition paper may be going away as what do you think?
The best interview. 5-5.
Let me start again. So I continue to think AI is going to have the most pronounced effect on us over the short term and the long term. It holds the most potential, both by virtue of the amount of information and the availability of information that we're all going to have, and certainly as you're being educated and educating yourself, what's available to you, it is going to demand that we develop skills that we may not necessarily have had to cultivate or utilize when we were consuming information from a textbook for read, and you could pretty much count on that was the settled body of understanding of that particular topic. And it's also going to, I think, cause certain skills to atrophy, as innovation always has. As things get easier, you no longer rely on certain skills. In this context, the English composition paper may not be a thing for students to write anymore.
Crazy.
However, the idea of critiquing an artifact, a piece of writing, editing it, getting a sense of its point of view, applying those critical thinking skills that we've been talking to. What is this author trying to accomplish? Who's their audience? Are they persuasive or not? Are they trying to even persuade? Those types of critical thinking skills, perhaps more so than the development of the artifact, might rise to the fore. So I think AI, given that it's really just a toddler. It's only 3 years old, really, in our everyday lives. So it's just getting its sea legs. So I can't imagine what it'll be like when it learns to really walk or run.
Yeah, you're so right, especially with this whole now shift from generative AI into agentic AI starting to bubble up.
Absolutely.
Whole new playing field out
Absolutely. And more keys can be handed over to AI to accomplish a great deal. But it's going to need people to develop themselves as leaders themselves and good stewards of what they're trying to accomplish, even if they're not the ones brute forcing a lot of the work themselves any longer.
Yeah, I think you're so on. I have heard from many people even saying, like, in terms of the skills shifting, maybe this whole concept of more productivity. So maybe even the 40-hour work week is going to shift to 20 hours because now you're so productive that you don't need to have the 40-hour work week, but then now you need to get more people to get to that 40-hour work week. So
sadly, it sounds like an innovation that'll be arriving at the end of my career rather than the beginning of it, so I won't get to enjoy all that free time quite as much, but I like working, so that's okay.
No, I was gonna say, hey, you could be part of it too, stick around, try it out a little bit and then say, not done.
I'm playing the back nine, I could use a nap, it's fine.
Well, this has been very good. We've had a lot of interruptions, but
it's New York City.
Yeah, this is truly a non-AI generated video, for sure.
That will be instantly verifiable without any critical analysis whatsoever.
For sure. Is there any final notes that you would like to add or main takeaways you want to highlight before we close out this video?
No, I just think it's an exciting time. I mean, it's an old trope to say that the only constant is change. That has certainly been true in our industry, in every industry. And I think that AI really does hold so much potential, and the idea of being able to access the sort of the known world at your fingertips really has just so much potential for so much good. It's just going to require us to be skilled, again, consumers and agents within our own lives and within the educational ecosystem to make sure that we're harnessing all the positive potential that's there and keeping the potential downsides at bay.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's going to be the great note we leave off on. So thank you so much for being here today, Eric, in this sunshine and busy New York City spot.
And thanks to everyone who joined us on camera.
Of course, yeah. Thank you, everyone. And remember, stay curious. See ya.